Well, hi, I want to welcome everybody back to Ponderings from Palm Coast. So today is Monday, April 7th, and a lot of water has gone under this bridge since we last spoke. So I want to share a couple of things that are going on before we get into my guest today that I've brought in, Jay Wagner, who is a phenomenal person, has a lot of experience, and we want to dive down into that. But first, I want to share some feelings I have about last Tuesday's election and how I found it so empowering and how effective and an opportunity to move forward. And as I shared with my spouse, who was pretty decimated and very upset that we didn't win, I explained not every battle is won during a war. And we have to remind ourselves where we live. The history of Flagler County and District 6. And of those you don't even know, if you look back to the last 3 cycles of running against Ron DeSantis, used to be our District 6 representative. Then he moved on to be governor, and Michael Waltz stepped in. His first re-election, we had 0 candidate. He ran unopposed for a House seat. The next cycle, we had a phenomenal candidate in James Stockton, and he ran for the 2024 election in November and failed to get more than 30 points behind Mike Waltz. So that tells you the challenges that we face being a liberal Democrat in this region. And yet, in a 2-month special election, our turnout was twice what it was expected, in the 40s. We went from 30 points behind to somewhere between 14 to 16 points behind. That's a win in my book. That's how I feel about the movement forward. It's a great place to be. The other thing that we need to acknowledge, we got this nation's attention of what's going on. Now, I'm going to be honest. Donald Trump is his own worst enemy and is helping us every day. It's painful. There are people being fired and hurt and fearful and scared. Oh, and as you guys hear me say all the time, touched. But as they say, the effing find out is what's happening. So today is the first day going towards 2026. We're going to find a great candidate. Josh Wheel on his Facebook page is sharing some phenomenal, positive conversations. We did great. We got their attention. We made them spend money. We made them pull Elise Stefanik's nomination out of fear of the House. These are all good things. So I want to congratulate and acknowledge everybody that took a moment, came to a rally, put up a sign, but we're still in this battle. We're still fighting for the rights and the needs of those around us, whether they know it or not. And they will soon find it. The second thing I want to touch on quickly is, for those of you that are paying attention, the oil, gas, terminal, depot, and Palm Coast is still a very aggressively being addressed, talked about. Have your say. Come to the Palm Coast City Council. Share with them your feelings of whether you support or not support this effort. A lot more to come. I was at the county commissioners meeting today, and they suspended it from their own agenda because of Palm Coast's saying they need to do more study before they know what to do. And yet the room was full of people that had opinions. And I just love seeing that. I love seeing people organized to speak what's going on. I serve this country so you could do it, so you could get out and see. So with that, I want to take my attentions to Jay. Jay, welcome.
Hey,
Thanks
Mark.
for coming by. I know we talked briefly at First Friday a couple weeks ago. It's on that other podcast. First Friday was an amazing time, but I was so impressed, and I want to hear in a more quieter nature. Those motorcycles were pretty hard in public, and just get a chance to chat with you and get your feeling of some things that are going on as someone who's right here, Palm Coast, just like you, living it. And you had made a phenomenal comment on one of my podcasts, and we were talking about fear and being afraid and concerned. And so, Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What brought you to Palm Coast?
Well, before I do that, I want to thank you for your commitment to this whole project that we now have, where we have local Democrat progressive viewpoints that where people can actually feel comfortable on a YouTube channel in the comfort and safety of their own homes. And to thank Suncoast Media, both of you guys, for your unbelievable commitment to this project. I mean, I have some idea of what it takes, and just thank Suncoast and thank you, because I think it is a very big deal.
Well, it's definitely an area that I felt after the general election when I saw the Republicans on Joe Rogan and every other influencer, and there wasn't a lot of local liberal viewpoints or pushback to what I call the dis and miss information. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
So how'd you get here?
Well, it's been a long 80 years. Let's put it that way. So I will just say I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Kansas, moved back to New York City, where I lived since 1959. So I consider myself at this point a New Yorker, not so much a Midwesterner. Had a career, a wonderful career in dentistry. I was a general dentist, practiced for 39 years. My fondest memories actually are wonderful patients I had, my wonderful staff. I had a staff that made me successful, really. I mean, they were so supportive in so many ways. But time comes for all of us, change of life, time to retire. And my wife and I looked around. We were looking where we were going to go. My brother was here in Florida, but he was in Boca Raton. I didn't want to be way south. It was too crowded. So my wife and I came down. We looked around, and we were very disappointed. We were on the West Coast. We were a little bit south. We drove into the middle of Florida, and we drove home very discouraged. And my wife happened to be talking to a friend of hers who said, well, did you visit Palm Coast? I said, Palm Coast? Never heard of Palm Coast. As most people have never heard of Palm Coast. And so he said, well, you ought to go look at Palm Coast, but look at a gated community in Palm Coast, he said, because you'll make friends faster. So this is making friends faster is a bigger issue, believe it, for me than it is for my wife, because my wife makes friends like that, okay? But so I went on Google Earth, and I went and I did a search for Palm Coast, and I flew over it And then I did a mapping thing, like one of the Google Maps, I guess, at the time. And I see Grand Haven laid out along the Intracoastal Parkway, gated community. I looked at it, I saw it, I said, this looks like an ideal place for us to settle. So we came down here one long weekend, found a house, moved here, and that's the story.
How long you been here?
We've been here now full-time since 2010.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've seen some things, huh?
Yeah, we've seen some things, and we originally bought the house in 2007. I like to joke, we thought we were getting a good price on it until 2008.
Oh, so, that correction was brutal. Wasn't it?
So we said, wow, this is a good buy. Well, then we had to live through a little bit of the downturn, and eventually we went on the upsweep again. But basically, that was the story. Why did we come here? I didn't want to deal with the winters anymore. I wanted to deal. I didn't just had it with winter shoveling, snow, and everything. And if you're from New York or you're from New Jersey and most of the northeastern states, property tax. We were edging in on $20,000 in property tax and
Really?
everything. So you look at your finances and all of these things, and you make a decision. And that was how we wound up, getting down here. The one thing that we didn't research that we should have researched was the politics. Okay, because I think now, had I known that I was moving into a county with such a deep Republican history and such a Democratic, imbalance, I probably would have been more reluctant. But on the whole, we're happy we're here.
Yeah, it, as some would say, and Coach Mike
Right.
would say that the transition was in 2006-07 when Obama was elected and carried Flagler.
Yeah, no, I know.
And I believe in most parts of the country there's a pendulum that kind of swings back and forth. Don't know if Florida is going to be part of that swing, but I feel it. I think that change is always. And I wasn't from this area either, and I kind of knew what conservativeness meant in the South, but my wife struggled and still struggles with the mindset and the belief. And we could dive into and spend the rest of our life talking about the history and what makes the people that live here thinking the way they are or not. But, I'm really interesting as a dentist.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on all these things that are going on about like the fluoride, right? Well, you and I had talked about the removal of fluoride, and I learned here that fluoride is naturally occurring here in our Palm Coast water. There's none added, but there still is some benefit to the Florida. But
well, I'm here
how
to
does a dentist think?
I'm here to clarify that issue for you, because I know a while back I did some research on this. Flagler County was considering in their non-municipal areas where Flagler County handles the water, fluoridating, and I don't think it ever came to fruition. Palm Coast, none of the cities in Flagler who have community water service fluoridate. But if they say to you that we don't fluoridate because we have naturally occurring fluoride, yes, they do. 0.0671 milligrams per liter, far below the standard for ultimate protection of the developing teeth in infants and young children. That standard is 0.7 milligrams per liter.
Oh,
all right.
wow.
So the amount in the Palm Coast, Florida, is on the verge of negligible. It provides very, very little protection compared to optimally fluoridated water at 0.7 milligrams per liter. And there have been like thousands, over my 39-year career, thousands of studies showing the safety of fluoride. There have been studies that come out of not really good scientific areas, more politically motivated than anything, and all of these studies have been debunked. We've had fluoride in the water. I think the earliest one in the United States was something like in the 1940s. And so these issues that people tell you, IQ, stunting IQ, you would have seen this way before, this time, over a almost 100-year time span. To give you another concept, in the state of Florida, I think we are number 23 in terms of fluoridation. Approximately 70 some odd percent of the population of Florida receives fluoride from community water services. Some of that may be natural, and some of it may be supplemented. All right? In the United States, about 62%, 63% of the population throughout the United States receives fluoride in their community water supply. Again, some of it could be natural and some of it could be supplemented. And so, this is not something that a small number of people are receiving. Now, you have to be careful with fluoride because you can have too much fluoride and it will cause discoloration of the teeth, things of that nature.
Sure.
So this is why it's been very carefully calibrated. You have to understand the complexity of it is you may have fluoride in your water supply, community water supply, but if you are using a filter either in the refrigerator or on your incoming water line or under your sink, you have to know, is that filter removing fluoride? Some do, some don't.
I hadn't even thought about
So,
that.
right.
Because
So-
I think all of us have some filters on our
right,
water
exactly.
here.
So now you have this other added layer of, let's say, Palm Coast having a negligible supply in the water system. If you now have a water filter, well, whatever was negligible is now below, it's undetectable.
Well, and I was talking to somebody recently, pro and con, about fluoride, and he had made the comment, well, look at any tube of toothpaste, and it says, do not swallow. And he believes it's because there's fluoride in it and it can be harmful.
No. It's because it's first of all, it will not poison you. And it's there so that you're not swallowing this over a long period of time. In other words, some of these studies that are done, they expose mice to, amounts of fluoride, hundreds to 1,000 times more than any human would ingest, and then they show a deficit, and then they make a study out of it. But that's there for the protection, especially of young children. Young children, let's say from the ages of below 3, probably should not be having it. You should be brushing their teeth, but you should not have fluoride in the toothpaste that you use. You can use, there's a lot of toothpaste that have cleaning action and detergent action for removing plaque, but they don't have fluoride in them. So children under 3, that's the safe measure because you can't tell them don't swallow. They will swallow. From 3 to 6, we say use a pea-size amount of fluoride. Don't put the fluoride of toothpaste.
Right.
Of toothpaste. Don't slather it on there. Multiple layers on
Like you see on all the commercials, right?
Right.
They want you to
exactly.
use half a tube.
Right. It's like a pea size, and from 3 to 6. And after the age of 6, you can then move on to like what we would consider a more adult use. But topical fluoride is important, but it's 2 different mechanisms. I don't want to belabor this or get too technical, so tell me if I'm getting too
Well, that was the question I want.
Right.
The ingestion through water
Okay, right.
of fluoride
Right.
actually still benefits the teeth under the surface, correct?
Here's precisely what happens.
He's the dentist. We're going to hear him.
When you are ingesting fluoride in your water at the optimal level or slightly below, That fluoride is incorporated into the enamel of the teeth forming in your young child, your newborn. It starts in the fetus even, and you have that fluoride going in and changing the actual structure of the enamel crystal. I won't get into the chemical names, but it makes the enamel more resistant to acid attack, such as we get
from eating.
from sucking on chewing
candy.
on sugar candies, okay? Sugar in the mouth plus bacteria produces acid. So the fluoride now has gone into the actual structure of the tooth to make it more resistant to that acid attack.
Right. Well, you had made that comment to me that the only people that really benefit from the reduction of fluoride are the dentist. Because now you have the youth with their baby teeth, which come and go, they're not permanent, and they develop cavities and issues, and they're painful, and you have to go in and treat that, right?
Yeah, and there's not a dentist alive that really likes to have to go into a severely decayed tooth in a young child. I guarantee you. And I treated a lot of children, but this continues. I mean, all the enamel, even once the child is born, by the age of somewhere around 8, 9, 10, all the enamel in the adult teeth is formed. So you have the same benefit. Is it literally changes the chemical composition. It's bound up. It's not floating around. It doesn't dissolve in your mouth. You're not constantly being exposed to it. It chemically changes the structure of the enamel and makes it more resistant. By the age of 8, 9, most of the enamel now is formed. So the fluoride benefit is a little bit less in terms of the development of the tooth, although there are other parts of the tooth. So what you have now is just drinking fluoridated water will provide some minimal benefit, but the real benefit then shifts over is brushing with fluoridated toothpaste, because now you're applying it continuously to the outside of the teeth. Again, without getting technical, but I spent a life. This was my life's work, folks. And when you eat chew candy, high carbohydrate, bacteria is always in the mouth. It's always producing acid, so that there's always some little interplay between, a little bit of acid gets in there and starts to soften the tooth, and a little bit right on the surface. And then fluoride toothpaste comes along, you brush it on there, the fluoride's reabsorbed into that softened area and remineralizes it. That's the whole point of fluoride toothpaste.
And that's the topographical or the surface treatment.
Right.
So if I understand the benefit of fluoride in water is to build and prevent unruptured teeth that are still under the surface,
that are still developing,
that are your baby teeth and things that come out, and then your adult teeth that comes out, which cannot be replaced by brushing, because you can't brush the teeth that are under the gum.
Right.
That's amazing, and yet you and I talked about when we mentioned this fear of vaccines, this fear of fluoride has caused cities, and I believe Utah just passed a law getting rid of fluoride in the entire state.
Yeah.
Because of fear. As we all know, a lot of people have fear of the dentist, don't they?
Yeah, they certainly do. There's a fear of the dentist, and why do we have fear of the dentist? Because in the early parts of the century, tooth decay was so rampant, it was much more difficult to treat, and it definitely was painful to treat. And so parents passed this along generation to generation. Either didn't take their children to the dentist, a lot of reasons. Undoubtedly, one was financial, but a lot of it was psychological. And so it becomes a self-perpetuating thing. But I can tell you, in 39 years, the difference in dental decay that I saw in children, just with when our community used fluoridated water, New York City eventually adopted fluoridated water, was dramatic. Most of the young children that came to see me, and I was a general dentist, not that they didn't have zero decay, but it was so vastly different than when I was in dental school. It was vastly different. And when it was vastly different when I was in the Army. And it was vastly different than when I was in the early 70s working in various offices before I had my own practice. We would see a lot more. And over the years, this just became less and less and less of an issue. And with that, you have a generation of children who grow up not knowing anything about rampant dental tooth decay, who haven't had their mouths decimated by this. They don't have to go through multiple prolonged dental procedures. And so they have a different attitude, which then they pass on to their children. And it's a self-propagating thing. We can probably expect, Mark, a 25% increase in childhood dental decay from if fluoride would just be totally removed altogether. You're going to find that. It's been estimated that $1 invested in fluoridation saves $38 in dental expense. Like, most people would say, well, if I could invest $1 and get $38
Right.
back, that would be great.
Well, and I always felt, and I've had this conversation with my brother who was on the economic/business side working with Gentle Dental and Interdent and these larger corporations.
Right.
He was constantly going to Washington and trying to get dental added to our Medicaid and Medicare system because it is a medical issue, and they have found that poor dental practice and experience and decay is directly linked to other types of diseases, including heart disease and other things. If the society, if the country saw dentistry as a regulated, recommended, insured, and mandated service, that would automatically motivate them to look at the fluoride. Because, as you said, $1 in, $3, $38 save, and what do we hear every day on the news? We're saving government money. So everybody in their right mind would want to add fluoride if society was covering dentistry. And I know a lot of the dentists feel that way and find it to be very frustrating because even here in Palm Coast, I heard a number recently that said like 25% of the people living in retirement community have no dental insurance. They're paying with cash. Myself, I'm one of those people. I do not have dental insurance and have to go out and find and pay for cleanings and all of that because it's not even, it's like a secondary thought.
What you say is very true. When I was on the verge of retirement, or when people found out I was retiring, people would come in and they would ask for my advice. I'm going to be retiring. Should I have dental insurance? And I said, and some of these people had been with me for a long time, and over the course of time, their dental health was very stable. They had very low incidence of dental disease. They didn't have gum disease, and they didn't have tooth decay. Now, every once in a while, you might have to have a filling replaced. Nothing lasts forever. The mouth is a hostile environment for materials. So I would say, look, you're in very good shape. Visit your dentist like you've been doing here, through whether it was every 3 months, every 6 months, and you'll be fine. But for those people who were constantly, due to the fact that they had poor dental care in their youth before they got into my situation, my practice, they would find, I would say, look, you might want to investigate it because you've got a lot of areas here which could break down. So it depends a lot on the individual. And if you embrace, preventive measures, you'll be in a lot better situation than if you don't have preventive measures. When I started in dentistry, dental insurance came around. In some cases, they would pay you to do a filling, to take a tooth out, to do a denture, to do all the expensive things, but they wouldn't compensate a patient for having preventive treatment, having their teeth cleaned,
cleanings and
that kind of thing.
x-rays and all of that,
It's
yeah.
pretty much reversed now.
Right.
Preventive care is almost universally covered, and in many cases, it's covered at 100%. If you have an insurance policy, folks, and you're an adult, make sure you take advantage of it, because most of you will have 100% coverage on the preventive side and less coverage on the doctor needs to get to work to do something to help you side of things.
I think that would be with a supplement. I know for me, Medicare, the only way to get it is to buy into a supplement,
Right.
secondary, that would cover some levels of dental care. And I've talked to people in other parts of the world that can't even get their mind around how we in the United States kind of pick and choose what we think is covered, like glasses or eyes and these kind of things. And I was reading recently about during the development of Medicare back in the 50s when the government decided they needed to produce this national health care that we would all be exposed to and buy into and whatever. And one of the negotiations with the Republicans at the time was excluding dental and vision in the program. It was part of this governmental negotiation back and forth about what it would offer and the time frame and all of that. So, yeah, that's amazing. And we're so unaware and we take for granted or we're naive to this process. I just was visiting my grandson and he just had 2 teeth popped out. And luckily he's in California and they have fluoride and they're trying to learn to get in the habit, and I'm observing the same cycle that I did and that we've all done to see that, and that's really great. But speaking of things behind the scenes that we're not aware of, another thing that I wanted to chat with you about that is really concerning me is this attack on regulations and how there are so many behind the scene protection programs that have been put in place to protect us, which I believe is the purpose of our government. Our government, it was designed and put in place to provide and protect the citizens from the top to the bottom. And so I came out of aerospace, in which we have millions upon millions of people fly aircraft, and they come in, they buy their ticket, they sit down, they watch a TV show or whatever, plane goes up, plane goes down, they get off. They don't even think about what it took for that to happen until there's a crash. I worked at the Boeing company during the 2 737 Indonesian crashes. That will get your attention. That got public's attention. And we see that even today, Boeing is trying to get themselves, their brand, back out of it. And you and I were talking recently, and you were sharing with me, even in your dental practice, how the learning of elements and things that were needed to be aware from a dentist or a patient coming, can you tell me a little bit in your 30 plus years of experience, how you saw that change and how the government's, I think, trying to protect us?
I'm going to go back a while, drawing on my age,
That's all we got.
drawing on my age to talk about some things that
Young kids love hearing us say
some
that.
people
right?
may remember, but some people may not. So I was in dental school. Sorry, folks. I was in dental school.
Technology,
Yeah.
phone on a wrist.
Yeah, and it's silenced, but I didn't silence my watch. Uh, so when I was in dental school, I was in dental school from 1966 to 1970.
Wow.
We did not wear masks. We did not wear gloves. This would be astounding today if you walked into a dental or facility and somebody would be treating you and not wearing a mask and certainly not wearing gloves. We treated in dental school people who couldn't afford to go anywhere else. In those days in New York City at NYU Dental, we basically were drawing our patient pool from surrounding us were a lot of slum housing. And the people were very poor, and they did not have good dental health. They had all kinds of gum disease and everything. But this, just to show you, 1966, 1970. In 1970, I went into the Army, and in 1970, people always joke about Army dentistry. I got to tell you, we were using masks and we were using gloves. This was like, and immediately I said, intellectually, I said, why weren't we doing this in school? I mean, it seemed like you should be doing that, there, but we weren't. It wasn't the culture at the time. It was not seen as a danger. It was not seen as a situation where disease could be transmitted. I don't fully understand that today after being a dentist for 40 years, something that boggles my mind. But then we progressed, and unfortunately we had the AIDS epidemic, and that changed everything. That changed everything in medicine. It changed everything in dentistry for sure. We then went over to just about everybody, and out of fear, initially, certainly, masks, gloves, much stricter sterilization protocols, to the effect now that the manufacturing of what most people call the drill, but dentists prefer to call the dental handpiece. We don't like to use that word, drill.
No, it's scary.
That's reserved for Donald Trump, that word. So that they had to change the manufacturing protocols to manufacture a handpiece, a dental drill, that could be sterilized. We had to then start the sterile. We always sterilized the instruments. I mean, the little scalers and the stuff and all that, the metal tools that we use, those were always sterile. But we had to go and start sterilizing the handpiece. It was a good move. Wasn't done because if you did it, you would destroy your handpiece.
Now, was that the dental community
I
that
think
was
it-
progressively working, or
I
was
think-
that the government?
I think it grew out of an increased awareness that we have to do everything we can for infection control. I don't think it was at that point at any time government or state mandated. It may have been on some advisory board somewhere. Certainly the ADA, American Dental Association, was saying, oh no, we need new standards, so that within the profession we generated new standards. And then this affected a lot of things that went on. And things that had always been regulated. But let's talk about things that have always been regulated, and that one is the X-ray machine in the dental office. Every dental office you go to has an X-ray machine, and that is state by state, but always most states have severe restrictions. They come in every 2 years. They check your timers. They check the dosage that's being delivered to make sure it's in parameters. They check a thing called scatter radiation, which when the X-ray beam hits the subject, there's a certain amount of scatter, and that scatter has to fall within certain parameters. Now, I took this a step further because in my dental offices, I literally had lead foil underneath the wallpaper. So, if you were, and
Sure.
if there was an X-ray machine here and you were on the other side of the wall, there was lead. And just like in the Superman comics, the X-ray vision can't go through lead. So
Now, was that back in the day when you were using film?
Film.
And the
Right.
X-rays had to be run through the processor with all the chemicals?
Right, exactly. So just to build on this was a heavily regulated area where we had to measure up to certain standards to keep the public safe, to keep myself safe, to keep my staff safe. But it was regulated. You talk about on the chemical side. Everybody today, one of the greatest innovations was the advent of digital X-rays, where we now use sensors in the mouth. Boom, it's a very short exposure time, probably 1/10 of what it was years and years ago. So we had that, but behind the scenes, I mean, there was an advantage to the dentist because you could see the results immediately, and an advantage to the patient is you can give him an answer immediately.
And to the technician that didn't have to handle the
behind
chemicals.
the scenes, we were developing, and what happened is now you have these liquids, which had now to be disposed of. Sorry to admit this, but for years and years it was not regulated. Now most places regulate it where you have to collect it, and it goes off to a collection center. Okay, so that the silver particles that come out of in the old style development film doesn't get into the water supply. So that was another area of regulation. I consider that good regulation. Was it onerous as a business person because I had to now pay for an additional something behind the scenes that I had to pay for a disposal service? Yes. But it was so correct and so well worth it to protect the general welfare, to protect all of
Well,
us.
not just us, but the
Right.
waterways.
Right,
And
exactly. The big one was, and I don't know if this is nationwide, but in New York State, we had to now have special devices to separate filling materials that were being drilled out of a tooth. Most people now, you have high-speed suction. So when you're having work done, you have that. It's not the little straw.
that great noise
It's
that we
the
like
big,
to
right,
hear. Huh?
right. So what's happening there is all of the debris from the mouth and the old silver fillings and everything else are being now taken out and thrown into a suction system. But rather than just go directly into the municipal water supply like it used to do many, many years ago, now all dental plumbing has to have filters that remove this, and it is sent separately as a biomedical hazard to be taken care of and recycled properly. Great regulation. I mean, to protect the health of the community. I mean, so there are regulations that are good, and undoubtedly, in some areas, there are things that are a little bit, over-regulated.
Now, did you have third-party people coming in to verify or to check that you were following these regulations?
You had to save the documentation that you disposed of it properly. You were subject if you could have a random, the state showed up every 2 years.
Right.
Okay. And that was not by appointment. They just showed up. Just like, man, Dr. Wagner, I'm from the state X-ray regulation, radiology. We need to, okay, fine. But by and large, as long as you saved and had your paperwork, all of these things you could produce it if you had a random inspection.
Tell me about your experience with mercury and that transition.
Again, most people of my age group will remember going to the dentist, and the dentist said, "Oh, you want to see this? This is really cool." And we had a little vial, and we pressed the button, and a little ball of mercury circulated in your hand, and you could break it apart and it would come back together again. Young people are not going to relate to that at all. Well, here's the danger. That was free mercury. That was actual free mercury. Mercury it becomes volatile, just like water evaporates if it's left on a surface. If you leave the mercury on a surface, it will evaporate. It goes into the atmosphere, and it's dangerous. Okay, you don't want to be breathing mercury fumes. So once the mercury is mixed into the actual filling material that goes into the tooth, it's no longer free. It's bound. It's not an issue. It's not a danger. But certainly, so we had a regulation now that all dentists all over the country had to send back, and it didn't make any difference if you had 1 or 10 of these darn things. You had to send it back under certain conditions. Again, no more free mercury in the dental office. It's a good thing. And what replaced it was silver fillings now, which is one of the common filling materials, certainly the least expensive of the materials, comes in an ultra-seal capsule sealed by ultrasound, so that when they mix it in that little vibrator thing that everybody hears from time to time, no mercury gets out. It's all self-contained. It's already mixed. You open it up, you put it in the tooth. It's already bound. It's not an issue. So another good outgrowth of good use of technology,
Right.
of manufacturing, and solving this problem of exposure to free mercury.
And see, that's the kind of the point, is that we are surrounded by our government, state, local, taking steps in their belief to protect you from possible harmful exposures to things. And that comes with regulations. I love to follow this is kind of morbid, I guess, but I love to follow the restaurant grades that are available from the county. Flagler County has an inspection team that goes out and checks all our local restaurants. And my wife and I, like most, like to try new restaurants periodically. And when I started seeing some of the more well-known restaurants, of which I won't share, but they're available for you to research, and I highly recommend, if you're curious about the safety of the food or the restaurant, take 5 minutes of your time, go to the Flagler County website. You can find a listing of all the restaurants and their grades, good and bad. But it makes me wonder the regulation side of the inspector that's out there. And somebody was telling me recently there's like 400 restaurants in Volusia and Flagler County and like 3 inspectors that they rotate around trying to get to them. And, foodborne illnesses and things like that. And we all remember, some of us remember Jack in the Box and those kind of things. So regulation is valuable, but do you think it's too much sometimes?
I think sometimes it can be too much. There's always this balance between, if you're looking at the corporate level, which, I was a small businessman. If you're looking at the corporate level, there are expenses and there are regulations. Well, my philosophy would be that if we have a regulation that preserves clean water, that's a regulation that's good for society. And it's hard for me to understand what would be bad about that. What would be bad about a regulation that preserves clean air? I mean, you remember we used to have, when coal plants were fired up, we had this thing called acid rain. The rain was actually acidified and it was dropping out of the sky in rainstorms, and it was corrosive and damaging to things. So there's things that are good and things that are bad. To make it into my particular profession, I came to view most of the regulations as being in the public benefit. And we had some areas that, I did have some disputes with. And one of them was OSHA. Now, the regulations that pertain to keeping my staff safe, we had a manual, and certain procedures had to be taken care of. Staff exposures in certain areas had to be regulated in terms of exposure to radiation. We all wore radiation badges. Those things were monitored every month. We knew if people were getting excessive radiation, and if somebody was, or they were careless and not protecting, it came to our attention right away before we had any serious issues. All right. So that was one element. We had elements in terms of what went on in the laboratory when things are being produced in the dental office, things that you had to prevent your staff from being exposed to in excessive levels. So those were all good regulations. But then in the dental office, most people don't even think about this. We have hundreds and hundreds of products that relate to the delivery of the dental service. I'm not talking about cleaning products, and I'm not talking about things like that. Some of which are in vials this big, which might be an ounce of something, okay? And then you would be tasked to label these. But there was no label that you could put on this little vial, all right, without actually obscuring what was actually in the vial. So you would have it on the shelf, and now we have issues from the dental point of view is stock control. When do we get this? This would be and what's on there? Is the material toxic? Is it flammable? All kinds of things like that. Little symbols. You've seen them on gas trucks. When you go by a gaseline truck, you'll see flames and things of that nature.
The chemical
or
signs.
you'll see a
skull
and crossbones. Excuse me.
Right. They're called diamonds.
Yeah, the little diamonds.
Yeah.
So we were trying to constantly, label all of these things, which took a tremendous amount of labor away from the delivery of care. And so I tended to view that as, an intrusive type of regulation. We had labels on things that were maybe cleaning products that could be possibly toxic or irritating or things of that nature. But there were certain aspects of that whole thing which I felt were just intrusive and interfered with productivity. And if it interferes with productivity, it interferes with the cost of delivering care, and generally in a way that does not benefit the patient. It's generally in a way that cost, as we have with our tariff situation now, are going to impact, consumers.
So the intention's good. But
the intention was good.
The overreach.
The elements that developed us to have a manual to protect the safety of my employees and anybody who was in the office, good regulation, absolutely essential. This didn't happen when I started out in practice. We didn't have any of that stuff. Yeah, it was intrusive at first. We had to adjust, but you make an adjustment. And why do we make the adjustment? Because it's beneficial to people. It's beneficial to humanity. That's the way I always look at it. I used to lecture to dental groups when technology started to really invade dentistry, going back into the mid-'80s, late '80s, when we started to have computers in the dental office. There was no computers in the dental office when I started. When we started to have digital x-rays, when we started to have intraoral cameras where we could actually show patients on a screen real time what was going on in their mouths. And I used to lecture and I used to say, when you make a purchase for your practice, are you making it for you, or are you making it for the benefit of your patient? Are you about to spend X thousands of dollars, sometimes $100,000, $75,000, because you want to be able to CAT scan your patients, which very few dental patients need? valuable for implant situations and certain oral surgical situations. Are you going to spend $100,000 and you're spending it because the tax law just changed and now you, as the dentist, can get a huge tax saving and a tax break that has minimal healthcare benefit to most of your patients? So that was always my concern. You know, look at why you're making this investment. If it benefits you and the patient, good. If it benefits you and not so much the patient, but you're getting a tax break, it's not, it's not in the best interest of what? I'm going to say humanity again. They're just people.
You, as a small business owner and as someone that experienced the transition of the dental industry, being able to have that view is lost on a lot of people. I was recently in a medical office, and I was talking to my doctor, and I asked him what his thoughts were on the fourth pillar of the Hippocratic Oath, and he went, "There's only three." I said, "No, some countries have developed a fourth one, not in the U.S." And he said, "Well, what was that?" And I said, "Thou shalt do no harm financially." And he looked at me and said, "Oh, yeah, I've been hearing about that." And the conversation you're just sharing with your dentist experience is the value to the patient, the value to the dentist, the doctor, and then the cost to the patient as a reaction to a CAT scan or some really huge fancy testing. And we had a pretty interesting conversation about, in today's world, looking at a 80-year-old, and I was just reading an article about this because I'm not too far behind you, and how the diagnosis of some prostate cancers in elderly men, they've chosen not to anymore process it, not to do surgery, and just leave it alone because the cost and the consequences of treating that situation offers no value other than generating funds. So it was an interesting concept. I do believe, and I'm a big believer in single payer, socialized medicine across the board in a lot of different ways. And as someone on Medicare, I'm about 3/4 of the way there now. Hopefully it will still be available. But what do you think of the dentist around here?
Well, I can only speak to my dentist, and he's great because he shares
Great.
my philosophy.
Excellent.
People come to me all the time. I can tell you.
We're always looking for sponsors if you're interested.
Here's the thing. It depends. I had maybe 8-9 years ago a very close friend of mine who I bicycle with on a regular basis. And he came to me and he said, my gums are really bleeding badly. I said, well, have you gone to your dentist? And he said, yeah. I said, I've been back there and he's cleaned my teeth 2 or 3 times and my gums are still really, really bleeding. And I won't use his name, but I said, look, I can't, I haven't seen x-rays. I don't know exactly what your story is. I'm not your dentist, but let me ask you to do this. Go and see your physician and get a blood test. Get a blood workup. He got a blood workup, and he was diagnosed with leukemia. And unfortunately, it was one of those leukemias which did not respond favorably to treatment, and he passed away too soon, in my estimation. And in my career, I've seen this. I've seen, you talked earlier about the interplay of dentistry and
Sure.
and
life and medical, right?
Systemic health. And I've seen this. I've seen this firsthand in my own situation where people come in and I say, this does not look right. You've been a patient here. You're coming in on your schedule. There's something more to this. And sometimes it was, just diabetes. They had developed diabetes. But more often than not, it was some form of blood cancer. So, yeah, I mean, there's this tremendous relationship that develops. And so, talking about generous, if you're in the hands of a dentist that is looking at more than the hard, just your teeth, and takes time to look around, I've seen oral cancer in the mouth in my career. So those are the dentists that, if I was to giving advice, I would say, if your dentist just comes in, he never does an oral cancer check, or the hygienist never does an oral cancer check, and all it is about, doing fillings and crowns and all that type of stuff, yeah, you might ask him, can you do an oral cancer check?
Right.
It's simple as that. But that starts with a philosophy. That starts with an awareness.
Do you think that's
starts with
being
an
taught
education.
in dental school?
Oh, I
now?
know it. I know it's
Bigger
being
picture.
Taught. Oh, I
kinda-
know it's being taught.
Right, because the link.
Yeah, no, it's definitely being taught. You cannot get out of dental school today lacking in that education,
Right,
for sure.
Right. That's amazing. Any closing thoughts? What's on your mind? And you want to, I know there's a lot of political things going on. I know you're involved
my
with
thought.
that as a retiree here in Palm Coast. But
My thoughts is, let's table that for another podcast, because you don't want to get me going on that. Okay.
I do.
I mean, I have a lot of
We'll do it
thoughts.
another time,
And
but-
all the people in this room know what my thoughts are. So, but I would say that's fertile ground for another discussion.
Sure. Well, you're
that
always
was
welcome back.
Well, I appreciate it.
Very
I
much
appreciate it. And once
enjoy.
again, kudos to you for taking this on and giving us a voice, basically giving us a voice.
So, Jay, if I was brand new, I just moved here, and we met at Blue Forum or whatever, and I says, I need to find a dentist here in the area. What kind of questions do you think I should be asking a dentist today?
Well, I think one of the things you should do is do this search before you have a dental emergency. When you have a dental emergency, you are not really too concerned about anything about having the emergency, the pain, whatever
Yeah.
it is, relieved. So I would say that do that right up front. I would say ask if you could have a short interview with the dentist, even if you have to pay for it. Ask if you could have just a very short interview to just talk to the dentist. That may be okay in some practices, maybe not in others. But when you go to an office searching for a dentist, it should be spotlessly clean. You shouldn't be going into a reception room with worn, frayed furniture where the floor looks like it's been worn through to the cement underlayment. You should take a good look around. Is it pleasant? Is it comforting? Is it welcoming? Are you separated from the staff by opaque glass sliding doors where you have to knock on the door and wait an indeterminate amount of time? Because that is not a patient-friendly practice. That is not a patient-centered practice. So that's one of the just very obvious things that you can do. The other thing, short of being able to have a talk with the dentist, is you're just going to invest in a first appointment with the hygienist and with the dentist. And that's probably going to tell you just about everything you need to know. And I would really talk to the hygienist. That's who I would talk to. What is the philosophy of the doctor? These are my concerns. I want somebody who looks at dental care as an entire body experience. It's looking for, does he look for oral cancer? Does he look for signs of diabetes? Does he look for any number of diseases which can show up in the mouth? One of the things is, if you go into an office and the cleaning takes 30 minutes, you're in the wrong office. I'm telling you. I have very good dental health, and my cleaning takes 50 minutes. If it's a 30-minute cleaning and all they do is take the little whirligig thing with some raspberry flavored paste around the teeth, okay, you're in the wrong office. That is not a dental cleaning. By definition, by the way, of the American Dental Association, that is not a dental cleaning. So these are things that you can be tipped off very early on about what's going on. Speak to the hygienist. The doctor comes in. Speak to the doctor. You'll know right away. Is he giving you time to answer questions, or does he just want to count your teeth, see if he can find some cavities and get in and out? Okay, that type of thing. And I got Mrs. Jones over here, and I got Bob Smith is over here, and Sally is over here. These are all things that are like little tip-offs. You basically want to determine for yourself, is this a patient-centered practice? Am I the focus of this, or is something else the focus of all of this? It's not hard to find out. And I would say probably that dental cleaning, which will be probably your first step in the process, will tell you a lot. If they're not using hand scalers, or they're not using the ultrasonic, and they're not measuring pocket depth, at least on that first visit. Now, pocket depth meaning, are your gums inflamed? Do I see signs of disease? If that's not going on in that very first visit, you might want to consider going somewhere.
That's really good information. I've experienced some of that myself. And unfortunately, as patients, we don't realize the power we have to ask those questions and to say, Dr. So-and-so, I'm looking for a dentist, and what are your thoughts on it? I love what you had shared early on about what are you looking for in your dentist health, in your dental health? Whether you want the full meal deal and you want to walk out of here in 6 months with $30,000 choppers, or you just want to maintain the teeth you have. And that's really good information to share, because empowerment is something that I think we all need to realize. We do have a choice. There are multiple dentists here, and the sharing of quality experiences, and that goes beyond just dentistry, restaurants, or good experiences, or things like that. So that's awesome.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for the time.
Things we've learned today. It's been amazing. Hopefully you feel quality, that you're getting some good quality information from this. I hope so. And I want you to please take a moment, as Jay did, and comment on what you see. This is just a growing media segment. We're trying to do better and provide. The things external are happening so quickly. I can't even keep up with it, as I'm sure you can't keep up with all the things that are going on. But above and beyond that, it's important that we share and talk dentistry, medical, tank issues, Palm Coast, quality of life.
Absolutely.
All of that.
Absolutely.
And I hope to be a source for that. So remember, please subscribe and like. We're trying to build the channel. We've got some great ideas coming down of some other information and interest. If you have some ideas, take a moment and share. Reach out. So with that, Jay, thanks so much for coming by. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences. And I hope to see you guys again next week. And stay safe. I'll talk to you soon.